tell us a bit about, first of all, how you got into the role that you're in now.
I was actually working in sales account management type jobs. I was there for quite some time, on like maybe 12 years or something like that. I can't remember. Quite a long time.
What you think are sort of the key advantages that a BA role brings to an engagement?
First thing I'd say is clarity from your career journey. What would you say was the biggest risk that you've taken and how did it pay off?
Gosh, you really have chosen a difficult one. The biggest risk I think I took was, cool, hey, and welcome to the Change Leaders Playbook, bringing you all things delivery leadership in a podcast. I'm Cliff, an experienced leader of change initiatives and advisor with a passion for the teams that are leading the way. Now, have you ever worked in business analysis or with business analysts? Do you want to know more about the role and how pivotal it is in delivery? Well, today I'm joined by Thando Jacobs, a certified business analyst with extensive experience and also the host of the Inside Business Analysis podcast. So today we're going to go deep dive into the world of business analysis and much more. So with that, it's my pleasure to welcome and introduce to you Thando. Hi, Thando. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Cliff. It's a pleasure to be here. What a strong introduction.
Well, you've got a lot to live up to now, haven't you? Let's be honest, but we'll see how it goes. So, first of all, I think it's a genuine pleasure to have you on the show. We connected not long ago, and I just think personally, I think we hit it off. And I just wanted to give people in this audience an opportunity to learn more about the business analysis or BA skill set, and you as well. So, tell us a bit about, first of all, how you got into the role that you're in now, and we'll then move on to something that's really interested me is about the podcast. So yeah, how about business analysis? What captivated you about that role?
So Cliff, a lot of people who work in this space in the project world in IT typically say that they fell into the role, or they were doing something else and then figured it out along the way. Whereas for me, I was actually working in sales account management type jobs. I was there for quite some time, on like maybe 12 years or something like that. I can't remember. Quite a long time, and it just came to a point where I needed a change. I needed something new, and as the stars aligned, because there's always kind of feeling that way and thinking that one of my clients was a business analyst, and then she just randomly said to me, you'd make a good business analyst, and I was like, okay, what does that mean? What does it look like? And then, long story short, that's when the seed was planted. I put in the work to go through training and like learning from people who have a training program to teach people like myself who wanted to switch careers to become a business analyst. That took a long time, but put in the work, made it happen, and eventually landed my first BA role about seven years ago. Yeah, so I've been a business analyst now for 7 years. I'm still enjoying it. I'm still here, so that's a good sign. Over those 7-year period, obviously, I've networked with a lot of people, because one of the things, as I mentioned, was I did this deliberately. So one of the things I was also doing deliberately was reaching out to people on LinkedIn and saying, hey, let's have a chat, because I'm really interested in this career. And that carried on even after getting the role, even after getting into this field. It carried on me reaching out to people saying, let's have a chat, let's talk about business analysis, let's talk about what you do and how I can learn from you. And then one day I kind of thought to myself, why don't I just record these conversations? Because I'm already having them. I'm reaching out to people, I'm doing the work, but I'd like to also give something back to the people that I'm asking for their time for, and also to the community. And it just kind of was a natural fit to say, let's record a conversation that I would normally have anyway, and then post it as a podcast situation. So that's how the Inside Business Analysis podcast came to be, and that was just over a year now, actually. Yeah, like a year and 3 months ago when I started, and that's still going as well, so that's good.
That's great. And I highly recommend anyone interested or even not sure, just check out the podcast. You've got a lot of episodes already in such a short space of time, so you're clearly interested in meeting lots of new people. Some great episodes there. So you answered both questions with a nice segue, which is really good and seamless. So that wasn't planned, of course, but nice one. Now, I'm quite interested to know a bit more about what you think. So first of all, as you're now pretty experienced, 7 years into business analysis, what you think are sort of the key advantages that a BA role brings to an engagement and brings to a project or a program, and what are the key things that you think are really pivotal in terms of that role?
So I'm going to answer this based on my experience personally, and I'd say that what I've been able to see, kind of me being on projects, what I've been able to see happen, the first thing I'd say is clarity. A lot of businesses and a lot lot of senior leaders have ideas, to do something differently or to solve a problem or something like that. But typically what happens is, they are intimate with the problem at some level. And also they may have an idea of, this system over there or that solution over there will be the solution to my problem, right? But the reality is they may not have the detail precisely of what currently happens right now, and is the problem what I really think it is, or is the problem something else? And even if the problem is what I think it is it happening in the way that I think it is happening? So an example of my career, one time I was working on with an organization, and the head of security at the time was kind of saying, we need a new software that will kind of do all of our like security for our laptops within this organization, because we don't have anything that can allow us to push security updates to laptops and things of that nature. And they were like, yeah, we just need to buy this tool that, it's an industry-wide tool, everybody knows about it, let's just buy it and put it in place in the organization. And I was like, okay, the problem is clear, you know what your problem is, you know what the issue is, but they were not aware of how exactly are these laptops being given to staff members. And so their solution that they were thinking was going to solve the problem actually turned out to not be fit for purpose because of the business processes that we had in that organization. We identified another solution to solve the problem. And so that's really the power of a business analyst in my mind. It's bringing clarity to, number one, what the problem is, and number two, does the solution actually solve the problem that you think it's solving? And then number three, off the back of that, when we have implemented a new thing, that new thing might be a system, it might be a process, it might be a suite of applications, whatever that is, how do we embed that within kind of BAU operations? How do we embed that within teams that are already who are going to be interacting with this new thing? Are they going to just fall off and do things that they used to do, or are they actually going to change the way they're doing things right now and start using the new thing? And I think, without going into too much detail, I'd probably say for me that's probably the value of business analysts. There's other things I could touch on for sure, but I'll probably say at the core of it, it's being able to help organizations to solve problems and solve them in a way that makes that's fit for purpose.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's a really good, insightful way of stating that. Maybe if I were to add something to it, clearly I'm not experienced enough to add to it, but I've had the pleasure of working with business analysts and similar roles for many years. So what I would say for me is the value I've seen is that these roles and these individuals are very, very good at providing clarity, very good at getting rid of the noise from the actual things that customers or users really need, and as well as then be able to help them with their prioritization thought processes. And then finally, I'd probably say that one thing where I really value business analysis roles and people, which I have not been great at myself, is actually being able to understand and trace that the thing that was being asked for and is needed actually can be tested to be validated. Not necessarily doing the testing across, sometimes maybe, but actually there's a connection there, and we can say, yeah, we can test and see that this thing is doing the job that we want it to do, and it's not just a solution off the shelf like you sort of alluded to.
And I'll add one other thing as well that I just realized. Big value for BAs in my mind. It's really the fact that we sit in the middle of business and technical teams, and people, would say that the business team and the technical team don't really know how to communicate with each other. And that's true to some extent, because the technical guys, for instance, would want to be told precisely which database needs to be looked at, or precisely which part of the system flow needs to change and divulge into another flow from another thing. Or maybe they don't need the technical bits, but they need to know exactly what the user needs to do A to Z, right? Like step by step, tell me exactly what do you want these users to do on your system. Whereas the business side, they're probably talking things like, we want to make things easier, simpler, more refined, more efficient. And if you go to a technical guy and say, okay, let's make this thing easier, well, what does easy mean? Does it mean that it's less pages? Does it mean that it's less information to put in? Does it mean that it's loading up 2 seconds faster than it currently is? There's all of these questions that the technical teams will have. And so the role of a business analyst is to be able to translate between those two camps and be able to say, okay, yes, we made it easier, but then go back to the technical team and say, this is what it means for that to tick the box to say it's easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Too right. Yeah. What does better actually mean? Who knows? Oh, well, you've got to quantify it. So in terms of it'd be good to just talk about the types of roles and people that you interact with in your role, and what would you say is, because clearly working alongside project leaders, program leaders is expected and is part of the role. It'd be good to figure out what are the dynamics like in those types of roles, and how have you experienced it? and why are they so pivotal in terms of working collaboratively together? And then maybe a bit more about the wider stakeholders that you might engage
Yeah,
with.
it's quite a varied range, and that's part of the role of what I do. I mentioned earlier on about the interaction between business side and the technical side. If you think about that, that's quite a broad statement in of itself, because the business can include all sorts of departments: marketing, sales, compliance, and finance, and other things like that. And then on the technical side, you have your typical kind of developers and software engineers, and then your testers, and even your QA individuals. But you got other people, maybe like a system specialist or a database administrator, and things of that nature. And so what dictates which stakeholders I'm engaged with is really going to be what exactly is the change that I'm looking at. If I'm looking at a change that's specific to the finance team, then that will be the finance team that I'll be looking at. And again, even that could vary from a specific team within finance. So for example, say it's the billing team within finance, or it might be kind of the whole department, because it's a massive shift in terms of how they manage their finance processes. So again, the project kind of dictates which stakeholders I engage with, but it varies. However, typically speaking, in almost every kind of piece of work that you're assigned to as a business analyst, you will have a role of someone along the role of a project manager. They may not have the title project manager, but there'll be a project manager in there, or a product manager of sorts, which is effectively the person who is accountable for the project and responsible for delivering ultimately responsible for delivering on the project. You will then have some sort of a dedicated technical person who is a technical lead on the project, and this is typically an engineer, a software developer, or an engineer or a developer. All of those titles kind of point to the same type of role. And then you work if you're working in what we call an agile environment, you may then have, say, a scrum master to help you kind of run in the scrum ceremonies and deliver things in iterations and at pace. And then you might also maybe even have a product owner, which is kind of a role that sits in between a business analyst and a product manager as well. And you kind of collaborate with them on certain things. And those are probably the typical roles. There are probably other ones which are dictated by kind of the company, the project, and the methodology they work under. So like agile or scrum or Kanban or completely waterfall and things like that. So it is one of those roles where you definitely touch points with feels like a million people every day.
Yeah, I can imagine. And it's funny because if I look back many years, probably before your time, I should imagine the role, it was never simple, but the variety of types of projects or programs or work streams was just not there in terms of where it is at now. Everything you said resonates, because you could be working on something that's very agile or less agile, or parts or a cog within a huge wheel or something larger, and you then play a business analysis role, I would imagine, at a work stream level or a higher level, where you are then interfacing with multiple streams of teams, right? So I think that variety must keep you on your toes and must be quite intriguing and interesting to keep you engaged.
It does, and it really does. And this is part of the responsibility of a business analyst, which I mentioned earlier about translation, right? You can imagine if I'm working on a finance project which is driven by a compliance change, let's say, right? The government has changed their rules, whatever the rules are, or maybe there's a new anti-money laundering thing that's been brought in play. Well, number one, I need to work with compliance to understand in English what the rules are saying, because they won't be written in English; they'll be written in legal language. So I'm having to translate that legal language to the business side and say, okay, finance, this is what the compliance regulatory is expecting us to deliver. Finance will then say, okay, great. Well, we need to still make sure that we are able to complete these processes, because that's what that's what's required from the HMRC or whatever. And then going to the developers and saying, okay, this is what all of those things mean in technical language, and it's a lot of translation, and that translation is not just kind of word for word. Sometimes it's kind of creating what we call artifacts. So it might be a process model, for example, to showcase precisely how something will be done or delivered based on the team is doing. And it's a lot of back and forth. You kind of take one piece of information over here, take it back to the technical team, have a discussion. They'll turn around and say, no, that can't be done, or it can only be done in this way. You take that back to the business, and you're trying to find a way in which both sides can actually come to an agreement. And that can take some time, but yeah, it's part of the job.
Yeah, absolutely, indeed. So I'm going to put you in a difficult position now. What type of people do you enjoy working with the most in terms of the roles? Because there must be part of the role that you think, oh, this is the most fun aspect of it. And with that in mind, what about the people that you tend tend to work with you think, yeah, I enjoy this type of this phase of the project or the program?
Yeah, do you know? I'll be honest with you. I personally enjoy working with people who are engaged, and by that I mean they're open to the change. Should I say, right? So every project is trying to change something, so they're open to like, okay, yes, we have this massive problem and we need to change it, and they're very much passionate about that change happening from the business side, and then from the technical side of things, I really enjoy working with people who are, I guess, also engaged in a way in which they're open to try and find the right solution to the problem, as opposed to being passive and just kind of saying, yeah, whatever works, or, if you just tell me to do something, I'll do it, but kind of being equally engaged to try and find the right solution. And I think for me, that's the number one key, if I'm being honest, Cliff. It's just let's work with people who we're all here to achieve the same goal, which is to solve this problem. And we're all equally invested enough to give it our attention, our expertise, our input into how do we go about doing that. Now, within that doesn't mean people won't disagree. It doesn't mean that people will always be happy with everything, but as long as like the people that we're working with are able to turn around and say, we're open to change and we're open to figure out a way forward together, that's the main thing for me.
Yeah, great stuff. And with all that said, then what about the future? Because we talked a little bit about the different types of projects or frameworks or methods that we now use, which we probably didn't use so much a few years back. That says to me that all change roles are kind of evolving and shaping. I don't think there's ever going to be a one size fits all, because this summit, every business organization has to do change, right, to survive. So where do you see the business analysis role maybe 5-10 years from now in terms of its evolution? Have you had any sort of thoughts about that, or are you seeing anything that may make you consider the future?
Man, that's a loaded question.
Very loaded.
Very loaded. So here's the thing. This is my personal thoughts. The first thing is that business analysis, which is the act of doing business analysis itself, is not unique to somebody who has the job title business analyst, because a project manager can wear two hats. They can kind of manage the project and do some business analysis at the same time. And so can anybody else really who is involved in the change. Somebody from the business could say, I'll do the business analysis. And by that meaning that they will dive deeper to the problem, understand exactly what the problem is, help to find out what the solution that's fit for purpose for that problem is, and work with the teams to deliver that. And I think because of that, I definitely think that the business analysis career 5 to 10 years from now, my prediction would be that number one, it would still be needed, it will still be in place, and it will still be something that organizations will say, yes, we need a business analyst. But what might be different might be that we'll be working with people who are also doing our jobs in some way, shape, or form, and we kind of need to be quite flexible in that. We can't be too territorial about things like this to say, well, I'm the business analyst, or I'm the one who does the requirements, for example. And I think what that then means is that it opens us up to then bring other things to the table, whether that's new skills, whether that's new abilities, whether that's, and maybe even whether that's kind of adopting new technology in the form of learning more about prompt engineering on AI and things like that. That's probably where I see it. I definitely see it in a sense where just kind of saying I'm a bread and butter business analyst might not longer be enough within the marketplace to stand out. You might need to bring another thing on top of that to then make you valuable to the team. That's what I think. That's not, I know that sounds negative, but it isn't actually. I think it's a positive, because what that means then is that we're constantly going to be evolving. And then you will then find as well that within the be a career field, you then have options. You might choose to go down, becoming a specialist in a specific software package like Salesforce, let's say, or you might choose to go down the path of being a subject matter expert in a specific area like finance, which you can still do today, but I think there'll be a greater weight in 5 to 10 years time on that type of path where you almost create your own career in a way that you want, and in according to the things that you like and the things that you're passionate about, which I think is super powerful.
Yeah, really good answer. And I didn't give it much thought actually, because I was hoping you'd give me the answer, which you have. and of course, that's just your answer. It could be other people will have a different view. I think it's really good when you talked about having specific areas that are more within your, let's say, niche or area of expertise. That is very valuable. It is today, right? And it probably will become even increasingly more so. And the prompt engineering aspect, I think that's a really good thought as well, because I think it's going to be needed, and business analysis roles and people actually will be very well placed to major on that. While you were speaking, there was another thought that came to my mind, which is about experimenting. Lots of experimentations happen within, let's say, operational teams or product teams, which I think can also be done by business analysis people, business analysts as well, in terms of trying to do some experiments, maybe short spikes if it's something more agile, to then figure out what is the actual problem. That helps us to identify the real problem and not just the problem that people say is a problem, and then potentially experiment in terms of different opportunities to tackle it, which doesn't necessarily give the solution, but helps to prompt what that solution might be, so that the right people who comes up with a solution can actually take it further. So that's something that came into my mind, which I think BA roles would be amazing at, actually, if not already doing. Right? I don't know what your thoughts are
No,
on
I
that.
actually agree with that, and the reason why I think BAs are greatly positioned to run experiments and almost just figure out what this scenario is because, number one, typically speaking, if you think about it, right, I work on projects. Should I say this way? I'm hired to work on a project. I'm not from marketing or sales or another department. So if I'm going to be running an experiment within your department to try and figure out what the situation is, I'm going to be unbiased in my approach. I have no assumptions either. Like, everything is going to get questioned, and I will look at everything in kind of face value, really, and be willing to ask kind of this dumb questions, which would then actually maybe give you the most accurate feedback from the experiments, and also then help you to understand precisely where the issue lies and where the problems are. And I definitely think there are a lot of what we call tools and techniques of business analysis, effectively how we do things. There's a lot of that which could be utilized for experiments and going through things like that. So I definitely think, yeah, BAs, we are greatly positioned to do things like that for sure.
I like what you said about being unbiased as well, because there can be a lot of bias when you're experimenting, coming up, and then you come up with a response or an answer, and you kind of, because you're literally living and breathing that feature or that customer journey, you may take a more biased route to solving it than if somebody was sitting back saying, I've got no skin in the game there, but I want to help you to get the right answer. Here's what I think based on the experiments that have been carried out. Really good. Yeah, thanks for that. So I would really like to know, with all that said, what for you would be your perfect day? Now, I'm sure you have many perfect days. In fact, I'm sure you don't, actually, because that's why you're there to solve and help solve problems. But if you had an amazing day, what would it look like as in your MBA role? And that could be also connecting what you do every day in terms of as a business analyst to working on your podcast and any other venture you may have on the go.
Wow. Definitely, having a conversation like this on a podcast would be there'd be a good slot within the perfect day. So I agree. I enjoy having conversations with people in this field. So I would include that in there, and building my network online and things of that nature. In terms of business analysis work, it is very varied in terms of what we do, and is varied based on the stage of the project. So I'm going to have to pick a specific stage, which I really like the stage between what we would call, I guess, design and develop, in between those two sections there. The reason for that is that the design piece is kind of where we've kind of understood the problem, we've gone through what the issues are with the business, and we've even done a high level discussion with the technical teams to say, what do you think? It doesn't make sense, that sort of thing, what we're thinking. Then at that point, we get to a stage where, we start to really define specifically what the solution would be, and then we hand that off to be developed by the technical teams, because we've had all these discussions, they understand what needs to be done, and therefore they'll go ahead and do it. It is that point I really enjoy, because it's almost like we get to a point where it's like, yeah, now we just need to build the thing that we've been talking about all this time, that we've been looking at this whole time, and everyone's agreed to say, this is what we're doing, this is the way forward that we're going, and everyone is very clear on what the problem is, what exactly the requirements are, what the solution that needs to build looks like or will look and feel like. So the perfect day for me would include that piece of having some sort of workshop with all the teams and saying, hey, this is what we're focusing on for the next iteration or whatever it is, and everyone saying, yep, I completely understand, and let's actually do the work now, as opposed to kind of going back and forth in meetings.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And it's funny, I don't, sitting on the side of the fence that I sort of, or side of the team that I tend to sit on, I can now realize actually that because you do so much work as a business analyst early on to actually really understand the problem, articulate it well, and make sure that those who are going to be ready for build are able to design it properly and then build it properly. That is so much of the heavy lifting up front. And if that's not done right, it gets seen later on down the line, right? So knowing then that you've got all that agreement and people are comfortable and ready to start building or get into low level designs, etc., and build, I can imagine now that actually that is a rewarding period. That transition is rewarding. And never really thought
It
about it
is.
that way. I was always thinking about when are we going to get the plans, and but actually I should be thinking about all the extra work that gets done early on. So yeah, that makes perfect sense. I get it. So on the flip side, then, what is it that perhaps you consider to be the pain points? Now, if I had a team of business analysts that was sat in front of me, and you can be the representative, right? What would they be telling me are the biggest challenges that they face, which they just wish that the rest of the team or their stakeholders just would help them out on to make their life easier and help them to be even better at what they do?
Wow, Cliff, you're really putting me on the spot with these questions.
Yeah,
I
and
love
don't
it.
get, I
I love
mean, and it's because I know you can take it. And actually, at the end, you'll get a chance to give me a
I
one-turn
love it.
question, and we'll wait
I'm the
for them.
spokesperson of the BAs in your team, and I'm telling you what our issues are. I think the first one I would definitely say is that as you've kind of touched on it just now, even though you didn't say it in this way. And I think there is certainly misunderstanding of the value of taking time to do business analysis. And by that, as you've said, it's almost like everyone's quick to say, we know what the problem is, let's just go ahead and build the thing or buy the thing, whatever. But actually, almost business analysis almost feels like we're saying, pause, let's look at the thing first, and then we'll deliver the thing. Can be a little bit of friction with that approach. And so I think that's one frustration. Another frustration will be, and this is probably for everyone who works in the project world, as I've mentioned, we would be delivering a particular solution for a specific team. Now, that team obviously has a day job. Then their day job isn't to deliver projects. Their jobs is to do whatever it is that they're doing on a day-by-day basis. And so what that then means is that there can be, I guess, it can be hard to find a cadence with the teams to say, let's meet up every week or let's meet up every other week to discuss progress on the project and move things forward. And by virtue, what that also means that there's clashing priorities from their perspective, because, we're saying, yeah, we really want to deliver this thing. But you can imagine if, for example, there's 3 projects happening and the 3 projects are happening in the marketing team and, there's only one marketing director, right? So there can be a clash in that way. So that's another thing. And then the final thing that I mentioned might actually simply be that there isn't a clear established route of career progression or career development for business analysts within the team. And that can be a frustration because, yes, you can become a business analyst, but then, some people are career driven. They want to know, what else is next for me, number one. Or number two, some people would like to get certifications within the field, which there are plenty of them. But if they're not feeling they're getting that support from their organizations to be able to attain those certifications, that can be frustration. And I think effectively what I'm touching on here is the investment from yourself, Cliff, to deliver to be invested within the business analysis team for them to develop and grow. So those 3 would probably be the frustrations I'd mentioned.
I'm so glad I asked the question, actually, because I wasn't fully mindful of that, if I'm honest with you, especially the career aspect, because I have seen in certain roles where we have senior BAs, lead business analysts, or portfolio level, but they're obviously few and far between. For every 5 program managers, you might only get 1 or 2 of those types of roles. And so in retrospect, there are actually fewer of those types of roles. And so navigating the career path is going to be challenging, right? And the accreditation, I definitely agree, it has been challenging because it's hard to get funding for those accreditations, because actually, in many respects, people tend to favour the need to fund projects or program leadership qualifications, rightly or wrongly. In fact, very much wrongly. It needs to be consistent. And they're very good thoughts, actually. So thank you for raising that. Sadly, I can't fix them all, but I can promise that I'll be very more mindful of that within my teams. And I hope that everybody listening here is aware and actually can take that on board too. Very good. Thank you. Now, I think, in fact, I know there are many transferable skills that business analysis roles and business analysts have. And there are also many skills that people who are not in those roles can potentially learn from that will help in other roles. Do you agree? And if so, which would you say they are?
So skills which people who are not in the BA role, yeah.
Yes.
So the first one is definitely going to be stakeholder engagement and stakeholder management for sure. We work with a lot of stakeholders, as I said earlier on, and the ability to engage but influence stakeholders is a big one. We influence decision makers, we influence things that happen within the projects, and then stakeholder management. For example, if you're implementing a new change or a new process, and it's impacting a team of 50 people, that's 50 opinions that you need to kind of make sure you're ready to handle. And so there's a big piece of that. So I think that's a big deal. Definitely stakeholder management and stakeholder engagement. The second thing is empathy. I think empathy is a big skill for business analysts, because without it, how will we truly understand what the problem is? Because sometimes what people think is the problem is actually more of a symptom, and there's something else underneath that that's leading to them facing their actual problem, but the real problem is something else. And I think, but the ability to kind of really be empathetic to say, I completely understand this process is so manual for you. You're doing this for 5 hours a day, that kind of thing. I think that really helps us to not only be empathetic towards them, but another big part of the BA role is that we then be branded what's called the voice of the customer. Effectively, what that means, as I mentioned earlier, on the meetings, not every stakeholder is available to be in those meetings. So then it's on me as a business analyst to speak on behalf of the business, if you're having a project meeting, and I need to be empathetic to be able to do that. And then the third skill, there's so many, but the third skill is going to be analytical skills. It's in the name, it's business analysis. You need to be analytical. And what that means is, you need to be willing to dive deeper into everything you're looking at. You don't take anything at face value, you question everything. And also you try and connect the dots. If there are dots which aren't making sense, you try and figure out, okay, how exactly will we make this work? And that can be across the board, from a technical situation to a business process thing, or something else entirely different from a strategic perspective. So those three skills I think are key, because the actual things that we do as business analysts you can learn that. I learned it on a boot camp. I learned it on a training program. You can learn how to do business analysis, but the three things I just mentioned, I feel like you can learn it, but there's also an element of just doing it. No one can kind of say, okay, do A, B, C, D, and E, and then now you're managing stakeholders or whatever. It's just some things are kind of, you have to be intuitive by yourself.
Yeah, great response. And obviously I can carry all of that. I think you're probably selling it even shorter as well, because there's definitely more, clearly, and I've not given you enough time to answer them all. Other things that maybe come to my mind is expertise in identifying a problem, because in order to solve a problem, you need to know what it is and articulate it properly, I think. And so being able to do that is a key step to solving it, and that's what business analysts do really well. And then the other thing I was going to say was I was thinking around when you were speaking in stakeholder engagement, there's a part of that which is, so first of all, what you said was very daunting and can be daunting, so we say to people, because being the voice of a customer, the client, and the business, so to speak, and the voice of multiple streams of stakeholders is a big deal. But then actually corralling and facilitating them, because when I look back to where I sat in and being part of a requirements gathering meeting, for example, which has multiple stakeholders from all areas, all wanting to have their say, that's a tough thing to do. So facilitating different personalities and different interests all at the same time is not something that people do every day, but if you can do it in a way that BAs can do it and do it, you can actually solve most facilitating or problem-solving communications and interactions, I find. And so I've always really been impressed by how great BAs can do that so eloquently and so well. And I really don't envy them at all, because that's my take on it anyway. So yeah, great, thanks for that. And that's really, really valuable. Now I'm going to ask you to throw a hard question at me, but beforehand I'm going to ask you one last question, which is probably not so hard, so hopefully you can forgive me for this one, which is there may be individuals that wanting to get into the role now that they've heard what you said, and if that was the case, what would be the best way for them, or options that they might have to get into business analysis, or try it out, or get some exposure to it, or experience in the first place?
Well, I can only speak to effectively do what I did, to be honest with you. I'm not saying it will work for you, but it worked for me. So the first thing is learn the foundational basics of business analysis. That gives you an insight into whether it sounds like something that you'd be interested in doing, and it sounds like the type of role that you want to get into. And then if it still sounds interesting at that point, then I would definitely then try and learn it officially, whether that means you go through like a training program, or you go through a certification route, or you do something along those lines. I think that's definitely the next thing. And then after that, or whilst you're doing that, build your network. On LinkedIn is a great place to just look for people who are already in the space, and then connect with them and say, I'm in this position and I'd love to become a business analyst, and then build your network in that way. And then people will kind of give you pointers and tips on how to do it, what to do, what worked for them, and implement that. And I think those three would be a good starting point, because anything after that, at that point, it's been probably talking about step 2. Step 1 is what I've just mentioned. So start there. But the reason why the first thing you should do is learn the basics is because you don't want to waste your time, wait until you get the job to then realize you don't really like the job. So like learn the basics. And when I say learn the basics, you can watch plenty of YouTube videos of people just talking about a day in the life of, or you could even, again, you can do the LinkedIn thing, reach out to me and say, or anybody and say, can I just pick your brain half an hour, tell me what you do, and then see how you feel after those conversations. But that's where I'd start personally.
Great, good counsel, good advice. So it's over to you now. What's the top
Oh,
question for me? Yeah, if you don't want to answer it, ask it. That's perfectly fine by me. I'm happy to end here. But if you do,
well, I don't know if it's a tough question, but I'm just interested to know from your career journey. Obviously, you've worked in change and program level as well, so you've kind of really seen things from kind of top down and bottom up almost. From your career journey, what would you say was the biggest risk that you've taken, and how did it pay off?
Gosh, you really have chosen a difficult one. The biggest risk I think I took was the jump from a switching organizations. And I think I suffered early on in my career in terms of imposter syndrome and not feeling as though I was good enough to work for who I would consider to be the best of the best, or work on really big challenging projects for complicated organizations. Every organization has complexities, right? But I think I didn't push myself in terms of going for the roles that I thought I could do. I knew I could do deep down. And so the biggest risk was probably the jump to switch organizations, because I had to switch industries in order to do that. And that came with it a lot of having to do lots more homework and understand the organization and the industry, as well as be a great project manager as I was at the time. So that was a big risk. To be honest, looking back, it was obviously one worth taking, right? In fact, I would counter that and say the biggest risk that I took actually was not making that move, because I would never have gone through the pain barrier that I had to go through to feel more comfortable and confident in other roles, and even bigger roles and even more complex roles, etc., etc. So I think for me, the biggest risk was doing that, and the probably slightly biggest risk was not doing it. Probably doesn't answer it incredibly well, but I would say, if someone was to ask me, Cliff, what would be the biggest risk in my career? If I were you, I would say the biggest risk in any career probably is not taking the action that you know you can and should take, because that puts your future, it limits your future, and therefore believe in yourself and take that jump. Otherwise, you'll never know.
Of course. Cool. No, great answer. Great answer.
Cool. Right. I keep telling myself I'm going to stop doing these things, but it keeps happening. Anyway, so look, you know what? I can't believe it, but we're actually out of time and it's time to stop. But it's been an amazing opportunity to chat with you, Thando. And if you want to get more from Thando, I'll put all the details about how to contact him at the bottom of this. Other than that, you can also reach out to me for more information on changeleadersplaybook.com. And for now, that's it. And we'll see you again in the next episode. Bye for now.